Good morning, good evening, and good. Let's try that again. Good morning, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are in the world. We were going to be doing a talk on JC's channel with regards to multiculturalism and Christianity. However, due to technical difficulties, that had to be postponed. So now here we are here. Here is JC. I'll just bring him on.
Of the formulation of the Quran.
These 2 pages are hanging, and this is why, in some ways, it's so good.
Sorry, Btbsoco, I wasn't ready to jump on yet. Just waiting for the family to jump on board because.
Oh, sorry, bro.
I just share the link anyway. I just share the link with the rest of the
with the people that are coming on board. Yeah.
Yeah. So just waiting for them to come in and just allow them to get in the chat. But I've already shared the link with several groups in WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And it should be a good show.
Okie dokie. So I'll be doing the presentation first, and then if I'll be doing the presentation first, and then if you want to sort of chair the discussion afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Obviously, just wanted to remind the viewers that I don't know. I just like to maybe give a sort of background to a little introduction. Anyway, you can obviously do it, but I mean the aim of the purpose of this debate is obviously to encourage more dialogues, and if you obviously support the views that Btbsoco is going to be sharing, by all means join the chat. But of course, if you are someone who is opposing and think that Btbsoco is talking nonsense and that he needs to perhaps be corrected in some of the things that he's saying, then of course you will also be invited to make your point. But of course, we would like to encourage everybody to keep it on the topic. It's multiculturalism, and I believe you're going to tie this with a Christian vision of this. And so
a Christian vision of politics. And you also asked me to weave in a discussion on the question of Islamization as well. So there is that also.
Yeah, that's very important, because I would like to understand also, like, what's the Muslim, if they feel themselves British. I mean, if they feel like they can integrate as a British citizen, despite they have a Muslim tradition and an Islamic tradition behind it. So it would be very, very interesting to maybe have some input from the Muslim community to share your thoughts on multiculturalism. Do you think it's working, or do you think it's not working? How is affecting you personally and your community? We'd also like to hear your views on this.
Okie dokie. Right then, let me just pull up. I'll need that. Just getting myself ready.
I'm allowing the family, because they're asking when the live stream is happening, and of course I haven't made any announcements on the Soco Films, the main Soco Films channel. So
do you want to maybe just put are you able to just put a pointer directing everybody this way? Because everyone, just for those that are listening, this was originally meant to be on Soco 1, but because of technical problems that JC's got, we've moved it to Soco 2. So yeah, there you go. I don't know. Are you able to maybe stick an advert on Soco 1 and point them in the direction of Soco 2?
Yeah, I'm doing this right now. Just bear with me.
Right. Shall I start the presentation while you're doing that?
Yeah, go ahead, Bob. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I mean it'll probably take up about 45 minutes, so it's best if we get that going. So I mean, just to let you know, the discussion for today is with regards to multiculturalism and how it relates to a Christian politics, and we're obviously going to be looking at what multiculturalism is and how it works, and I'm going to be using as a something to bounce off, something to work with, as a way of sort of cutting into the topic, I'm going to be using a section from the Casey Review into Opportunity and Integration, which was written by Dame Lewis Casey, DBECB, in December 2016. And I'll be focusing, it's a big report, there's a lot in it, but I'm going to be focusing on the section to do with religion, which can be found in pages 121 to 136. Now, the point is that I'm using the report as a means to bounce and to sort of ground my discussion around multiculturalism. But then I'm also integrating into that discussions connected to Islamization. And then additionally, we're going to then move on to, what is a Christian politics in response to the fact that we as Christians live in a multicultural society. So I've just gleaned off the points. So looking at pages 121 to 136, I'll come out with the points, and where I feel it's necessary, I'll give extra comments. So the report recognises that there are, in British society, and this is probably true for most Western societies, there are fewer Christians, there's more people who identify as having no religion, and that there is an increase in the Muslim population, and generally a wider diversity with regards to religious practice. It acknowledges, for instance, that there are tensions between religious groups, and there's more visible signs of religion, which has led to an increase in anxiety in certain sectors, which has not been sufficiently acknowledged or discussed. Those are the words of the report. That's one of the primary summaries. One of the other primary summaries is that more people are aware of the abuses of Sharia law, which lead to the regressive attitudes not in accord with modern values, leading to separatism and divergence within communities. Now, I want to draw your attention immediately to that kind of language. I want you to notice how there's a politicized characterization of Sharia law, which, if it doesn't accord with modern liberal values, is termed as an abuse of Sharia law. That's really important that you pick up on that, because that is how the liberals rhetorically work. It's like, that can't be real Christianity because it doesn't esteem the values of liberalism. That can't be real Islam because it doesn't esteem the values of liberalism or modernity. And it's important that you pick up on that, because that cuts to the heart of what multiculturalism is. Because multiculturalism at face value is a political narrative that the state tells itself, and then the state tells us, as a way of understanding and managing diverse values, diverse beliefs, diverse ethnicities, diverse cultures. But when you start to see how that actually works out in practice, what lays beneath that essential narrative is everybody needs to be a little more liberal. Everyone needs to be a little more progressive. Everyone needs to be a little more modern, because these are our shared human values. And that is what underpins the kind of multiculturalism that we see. The third major conclusion in this section of the report is that more people are seeing religion as a force for negativity in the world, for bad in the world, due to the failure, this is the report's words, due to the failure of religious leadership to counteract the anti-modernist forces. So there you go. I mean, the idea of opportunity and integration is intrinsically connected to the idea of modernization and liberalization. Notice the assumption that it is the failure of religious leaders to combat anti-modern forces that moves religion into the bad. So in other words, we have an equivalence. Modernized liberal religion equals good, anti-modern, anti-liberal religions equals bad. And it asserts that this is the reason why some people see religion as a bad thing. Not, as it were, the supposed opposition and this assertive desire of liberal progressives to make everyone more like what they want them to be, which gives rise to an intolerant milieu within secular liberal perspectives. So what they're saying is, it's your fault we don't like you. It's not our fault that we don't like you. That's essentially what they're doing. Now, religions of all stripes are lauded in this report, and they're lauded for their social action, for their alms giving, essentially, for their charitable concerns, which is praised by the report. Religion is viewed as a negative because it is connected to wars of persecution, discrimination, and a history which creates rivalry between different groups. Now, this is important because within the Enlightenment, within multiculturalism, the forces of liberal progressive ideology seek to tell the history of each of us, particularly the church, and that's why it's important for us to tell our own history. Between 25 and 50% of the UK do not see themselves. I've noticed JC's pulled out just for a moment. He's obviously doing some off screen. Between 25 and 50% of the UK do not see themselves as being religious. And my obvious thought is, why should they? The Church of England has essentially been imitating the culture. And so why do you need it? Why do you need a church that is essentially like your life if there's nothing distinctive or nothing different? Between 2001 and 2011, those calling themselves Christian had fallen from 72% to 59%, and only 1/3 of the population now attends a Church of England service compared to the 1960s. I think that what we'll see at the next census, which, assuming that it happens in the next year, we can expect that figure to fall even more. Okay. Now, the 2011 census also showed that Islam stood at 2.8 million adherents, Hinduism at 833,000, Sikhism at 432,000, Jews at 269,000. Islam had grown in the same period that Christianity had diminished. Islam had grown by 72%. That's between 2001 and 2011, and that's put down basically to high birth rates, immigration, and conversion. Now, what I would immediately say to that is that if we as Christians are committed to the idea that everybody needs to accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior, then immediately what we're saying is that there should be 2.8 million less Muslims and 833,000 less Hindus and 432,000 less Sikhs and 269,000 less Jews. That doesn't mean anything negative. It means that we would seek their conversion. But that obviously means that we're not in favor of a multicultural society. You can only be in favor of a multicultural society if you accept that you don't want everyone to become Christian. These diversities feel the tremors of geopolitical tensions across the world. So the fact that we've got these different communities with allegiances connected through different interwebbings to different politics around the world, they feel the tremors of those. So for example, Jews and Muslims connected to Palestine, Kurds and Arab Islamists connected to ISIS in Iraq, Indians and Pakistanis connected to border conflicts between India and Pakistan. The tremors of geopolitical, religio-social tensions that are connected to the histories of these groups, they bring with them. And if you think about it, if you've taken any time to study any of the civil wars that have occurred anywhere in the world, like in Lebanon, Yugoslavia, South Sudan, or Nigeria, it's this kind of diversity that is a key one of the ingredients. It's not the only ingredient. There are definitely other ingredients, but this is one of them. Now, the report goes on to say that interfaith work is counter to all, it doesn't say this, this is my reading of it, it's counter to all this. So the point of multiculturalism is that it's meant to counter this problem. It's meant to be the solution to the problem that I've just described. You've got all this diversity, these diversities with different histories that are in conflict. Well, we need some way to gel them all together. And that's what multiculturalism is. And within the respect of faith and religiosity, the report says that interfaith work is the counter to emphasizing the shared values and beliefs between religious groups. And it is precisely that kind of idea of shared values and shared beliefs that we see is why we're seeing syncretism across the established churches of Europe, that in their attempt to be relevant to modern society are going along with the culture. So in other words, their theology is being influenced by their politics, not their politics being influenced by their theology. You know, one can immediately see that you know, these kinds of churches that do this kind of syncretism and talk about the shared values of humanity would reject the Apostle Paul. They would reject the Apostle Peter. These, you know, the apostles would not be welcome in these fellowships. And that's quite telling, that if fellowships that are claiming to be Christian couldn't welcome someone like Paul, who, let's face it, you know, had a scorecard for how many riots he started in different cities because of his preaching. They wouldn't, that you know, we should immediately ask a question as to their apostolic nature. But that's where syncretism is coming from, and it's being encouraged by the state. Religious groups have complained of aggressive secularization and have complained about the restrictions on religious practice and expression. And if you want a catalogue of examples from the Christian perspective on this, just go to Christian Concern, go on their website, and just look at all the cases that they fought since their founding. And you will see that there is now a legion of examples of aggressive secularization and restriction on religious practice for Christians. Concerns have been raised about Islamification, an increase in signs and symbols of religious fundamentalism, such as wearing the niqab and the burqa. This is the report speaking, by the way. This is not me. This is what the report is saying. And it's the breakdown of collective identity due to liberalism, which cries out for a replacement. You know, we always say that nature abhors a vacuum. Islam is here as a missionary faith, and so are socialists. And so when we think of Islamification, we shouldn't think of it in isolation. What about liberalization? What about sexualization? There's many other kinds of isations that are occurring in our society, but the one that we focus on, the one that lots of people talk about, is the idea of Islamification. And the reason for that, even though there are other kinds of isations occurring in our society, is because Islamification is seen as something distinctly alien to our eyes, whereas sexualization and liberalization are seen as something inherent to our culture, as emerging from our culture, as opposed to something that's brought in from abroad. Unwillingness to discuss this has led to disaffection, which the alt-right has sought to seize upon for their own agenda. Now, it's really important that you notice that the report says who are the bad guys, the alt-right. Now, and who are the good guys? Those who are liberal and progressive, those that are modern. So that means that the state is not neutral. And that means multiculturalism is not neutral. The state is not neutral, and multiculturalism is not neutral. It has its opponents, and it recognizes those opponents. The growth of mosques is a natural outflow of the social trends of Muslims, and this has caused some disquiet. Now, since the 1970s, the growth of registered mosques, this is all the report, the growth of registered mosques has been on a 45% incline. So if you draw a line, let me try and do this on camera. If you draw a line, maybe the other direction actually. If you draw a line, it goes like that on a graph, basically, in terms of the increase of the number of mosques. It's risen from 1970s to the present. It's risen from around 0 to over 1,000 in 2011. And this number increases more when non-registered buildings are included, of which there are around an extra 1,000, so 2,000 in total. Now, only the Church of England is not required to register its buildings because it is the established church. All other religions need to register their buildings according to the law. Now, the report also acknowledges that all other minority faiths and novo church movements, so that's your things like your independent churches and your Pentecostal churches and your evangelical churches, indicate growth. They're all growing, but none as rapidly as mosques. The report goes on to say that white working class communities feel muted due to the fear of being called racists if they voice concerns about Islamization. JC, give me the thumbs up if you want me to bring you back in. Oh, he's going to type. Okay. You could have just do a thumbs up. Just do a thumbs up. Do you want me to bring you back in? Maybe he's not even listening. Anyway, I'll crack on. So, in terms of their fear of, okay. Their fear. Do you want to just cut down the mute on them? Do you want to mute your mic or mute me on the thing? Yeah. Sorry for you. It's all right. Don't worry. So in terms of the white working class communities, they've often felt that they can't speak about these issues because they fear to be labeled as racists. And indeed, we should be under no qualms. The accusation of racism has been used as a political tool to silence any disquiet about a number of topics, of which the question of Islamization is just one of them. And thus it has stifled free debate and discussion in British society. People are offended. This is the report speaking. People are offended by the architecture and the customs and are aware that expressions of Islam often highlights difference. And the reason for that is because Islam is a religion of difference. And such religions eat up religions of humanity. So those are religions that emphasize those common values of being human get chewed up for breakfast by religions of difference. And anyone who's ever studied religious studies will be able to verify that religions of difference basically just maul and munch on religions of humanity. It's why the Catholic Church is just giving out converts to every religion in the world, because it's gone down the road of being a religion of humanity, and thus it has nothing that is unique. The report goes on to say that mosques were lauded for their charity work, but the review noted the defensiveness of some of those inside the mosques to the government's interest in the mosques. So it noted the fact that there was a kind of defensiveness within some quarters. And then it goes on to talk about regressive attitudes. Now, a number increasingly view faith as negatively because of things like extremism, intolerance, child abuse. I'm sure that many a Christian has been the victim of accusations of being intolerant and being an extremist or so on. And these are labels that the liberal progressives throw at everybody. The report bemoans the move of some to the moves of some to move religion away from 21st century British values on gender equality and sexuality. This it sees as creating segregation and pulling communities apart. And it's at this point that you see quite plainly what the agenda of multiculturalism is. It's the idea that we should all be the same. That's what it is. It's not about you being different. It's about you being human as defined by the liberal progressive. That's what multiculturalism is about. And so, you know, it emphasizes our common humanity at the expense of what makes us unique. It is a project destined to be eaten up by the strongest man in the room. Ultimately, this kind of narrative has no backbone and it has no direction. And that's why we can all sense the rot. That's why we can all sense the weakness. And that gives Christians an opportunity. And that opportunity is what a Christian politic needs to step into. Now, the report continues. The public concern about Islam may be connected to twisted Islamist versions of Islam. Now, please note again the filtering that's going on. What it's essentially saying is that things that aren't things that don't align and synergize to modernist values must be, therefore, twisted versions of Islam. They can't be authentic Islam. It can't be real Islam. It was this rhetorical device that caught the church out. They did this to us 100 or 200 years ago, and unfortunately, sadly, Christian leaders were just totally ineffective in countering the narrative because it was coming from within what was presumed to be a Christian society. And so we were pretty defenseless. And they did that to us. It's kind of like, oh, this can't be real Christianity because it's not this. And Christians rhetorically were unable to counter that narrative because it was emerging from within what was understood to be and perceived to be a Christian culture. And it is this kind of this kind of disconnect, this kind of reinterpreting our faith that we're encountering in a multicultural society. The report acknowledges the belief that this regressive form of Islam is connected to the proselytism of Saudi Arabia, Salafist organizations, and Salafist individuals from the Middle East. So it acknowledges that the twisted version of Islam has a source. The report acknowledges Salafism as being all too easily accessible and its message popular with many young Muslims and converts to Islam. Salafists exert pressure even within the Muslim community to conform to Salafism. Not my words, that's the report's words. Now, in response to this, we're going to come into this a bit more, but Christians therefore should be pushing that Salafism should be treated in the same way that society treats the alt-right. And just as we conspire together to cut the alt-right out of any space in society, we should do that to Salafism. Not make it illegal, it should be legal, but it shouldn't be it should be treated in the same way that we treat Nick Griffin and the BNP. Now, that's one part of the picture. The other part is the Deobandi Muslim sect. So there's multiple sects within Islam, and the Deobandi is another group much like Salafists. And within these are the report's words. Again, this is not my words. These are the report's words. The Deobandi cultivate anti-Western sentiments and separatist views of Islam in our society. And it's this version of Islam that explains the findings of Channel 4 research, which, if you bear with me, I'll just bring up for you now. Now, a couple of years back, I don't know if people remember this, but Channel 4 commissioned a survey of over 1,000 Muslims across Britain to collect what were their feelings, their sentiments, their attitudes. And it was a very rigorous study. It was presented on Channel 4 by Trevor Phillips, Witch Doctor General of the Liberal Progressives, who himself has now been accused of being a witch and is having people wanting to chuck him on the fires of political heresy. I mean, there's not a Islamophobic bone in Trevor Phillips's body, but he is now a victim of the creature that he has created. Now, in this study, you're going to see certain things. Now, I want you to remember that all of the percentages that I am giving to you next are connected to a population of 2.8 million. So you do the maths. Okay, so 34% would inform the police if they thought somebody they knew was getting involved with people who support terrorism in Syria. That is laudable, 34%. However, 34% is nowhere near 50%, and it certainly is not 100%. Actually, the way that they've presented that could be reversed. Now, I'm not particularly good with maths, and I won't want to embarrass myself by getting it wrong, but you can do the maths. What leads up to the 100%? Because if the question was would you, wouldn't you, and only 34% yes, then how many said no? Do you know? 4% sympathize with people who take part in suicide bombings. What is 4% of 2.8 million? Now,
Well, can you share those statistics on screen if you can?
Because I'm reading them, mate.
Let
me see if I can.
Okay, because you got to share screen.
Yeah, but if people
tap on the fourth tab.
What I'll do is okay. Hold on. What I'll do is I'll share the link in the chat, and then everyone can just have a look at this and study it in their own time. But it's the connection of Diobandi and
we always like to provide evidence for.
Right.
We have to always.
I'll be honest with you. You were cutting out there, bro.
For the family, of course, when they want to research. Go back.
Hey, I'm going to share the link in the chat.
Yeah, hope my.
There you
Yes,
go.
I'm having some technical issues all day long, family.
Right. So.
All right, cool. So that's the.
Yeah, I'm gonna crack on with a presentation. Okay, so I want you to see that these are not my words. These are the findings of researchers, the findings of government reports. Now, 4% sympathize with people who commit terrorist actions as a form of political protest. What is 4% of 2.8 million? I mean, I'm not great at maths. Is it something around 20,000? If someone could confirm what that would be, if anyone's really good at mathematics.
Family.
Yeah. Have we got anyone who shared it? Anyone who's done the maths? What's 4% of 2.8 million?
112,000. I'm not able to share that.
112,000. I mean, yeah, there you go, guys. 52% do not believe that homosexuality should be legal in Britain. And what we've started to see in the UK now is that rubbing of liberal progressive values up against the kind of this kind of Islam, basically. But the reason that what I'm getting at is that it's the Diobandi version of Islam that is creating the milieu out of which these kinds of attitudes are to be found. Now, I'll just break that down a little bit more because the survey does. The net agree is 18%, strongly agree is 8%, tend to agree is 10%, the net disagree is 52%, strongly disagree 38%, tend to disagree 14%. So as you can see, it tilts towards the harder line attitude. 47% do not believe that homosexuality is acceptable for a school teacher to be homosexual. 23% support the introduction of Sharia law. Now, for us as Christians, that is not something we should ignore. And the net support of 23% is 7% strongly support and 17% tend to support. So what we've got is a large proportion, but by no means close to 50%, a lot less than that. A large proportion would want to see Christians to be made into dhimmis. 23%. I don't know what 23% is of 2.8 million. If somebody else wants to, yeah, 32% refuse to condemn those.
So net support is 23 only support.
JC, your
and
microphone.
10% to support. Okay, so 23% support.
JC, your microphone is terrible, mate. I don't know what's going on with your microphone. You're cutting out from my end. I don't know if everyone else is hearing you properly. Anyway, I can't see the camera, so I'm just going to crack on. 32%, listen to this, 32% refuse to condemn those who take part in violence against those who mock the prophet. 32%. Now, how does that break down? 18%. There's completely sympathize is at the 9% mark. Sympathize to some extent is 9% mark, and neither sympathize or condemn is 14%. Okay, so I mean the thing is, guys, like 32%. I mean, obviously, this is dated. This is I want to stress that this is a dated survey, and maybe we need to do another one and see what he said. But that's not a little thing. And if you ever wondered why you can insult Jesus, but you can't insult Muhammad in British society, and if you ever wanted to see proof of how liberalism is weak and why we need a muscular Christianity, there it is. They took away the blasphemy law in the UK, so you can insult Jesus, but they have imposed a blasphemy law for that reason, and that is why we've seen countless examples in art and artistic expression where our Lord is mocked, but yet if anyone does that to Muhammad, they're often accused of being a bigot, and some are even prosecuted or arrested. 39% agree that wives should always obey their husbands, and the net agreement is 39% strongly agree, which is 15%, and tend to agree, 24%. 66% completely condemn those who take part in stoning those who commit adultery. Well, that's good. Please, the net condemnation is 79%, completely condemning is 66%, and condemned to some extent is 13%. The net sympathizers, i.e. those who are in favor of it, are 5%, completely sympathize 2%, and tend to sympathize 3%. 31% think that it is acceptable for a man to have more than one wife. I mean, that's what their religion teaches. Why I'm shocked that that's not 100%, to be honest. That would mean that there's a whole bunch of Muslims that are very selective in their Islam, because you can't really read the Quran and the Hadiths without acknowledging that a man can have more than one wife. But that would be a sign, I guess, of how maybe Muslims in the UK have been influenced by British norms, which shows that you can influence people by British norms if they're strong enough and rooted enough. And please note that this is something that is indelible to the Christian identity, and something that has so far managed to resist all the other kind of liberalizations that have occurred. The idea that marriage is between one and one. I mean, I can't even say man and woman now because they've changed the law, but one and one is still the norm. Now, it goes on to list positive findings, and just for the sake of balance, I want to mention some of those. A large majority of British Muslims feels a strong sense to belonging to the local area, 91%. And that's higher than the national average. A large majority of British Muslims feel a strong sense of belonging to Britain, 86%. I hope that answers your question, JC. A large majority of British Muslims feel that they are able to practice their religion freely in Britain, 94%. British Muslims are more likely than the rest of the population to feel that they can influence decisions affecting Britain, 33% versus 21% in the rest of the population. British Muslims are more likely than the rest of the population to feel that their local MP reflects their views, 44% versus 41%. Now, I'm obviously tempted to put on a bit of a cynical twist to some of those stats, because obviously there is a narrative that we could put over the top of that, but I'm just going to leave them there in the air. Now, coming back to your Deobandi connection, Deobandi scholars and networks and institutions influence around 45% of the mosques in the UK. Most Islamic training is done by the Darul Uloom, and they are responsible for most of the training within Islamic institutions. There are genuine attempts, and this is noted in the report, and it should also be noted by everyone. There are genuine attempts by an insignificantly low number of Muslims to modernize Islam. So one example of that would be Dilwar Hussein's New Horizons in British Islam, who's the radio talk show host who used to be an Islamist and then became a kind of liberal progressive par excellence. He would be another example. The guy who set up the Quilliam Foundation, that would be another example. And we can see that multiculturalism is really just a code for liberalization along humanist lines. Now, it goes on to say in the report, and genuinely, the report focused in on Islam. It's not just me. In the religious section, the report focused in on Islam. I'm literally just went through it point by point. Young Muslims fashion their personal identity from Islam due to their engagement with politics outside of political traditional structures. So it's being political, but not in the sort of liberal, democratic political structures that we think of when we think of politics, because of our, Western cultural tradition. They're particularly concerned with issues connected with the wider ummah in the world. That's the wider Islamic community. And the report cites academic research that backs up that point. And this has actually been one of the secrets of the Islamic community's success in creating a strong Islamic identity, is the engagement of its people with the idea of the wider politics of the Islamic Ummah, particularly concern for persecuted Muslims, like the Rohingya. We all heard about the Rohingya, but did we hear about the persecuted Christians of Burma, like the Kachin Christians? No, we didn't. There's a reason, and that's why we need a Christian politics. Whilst there are many who choose this, the report also acknowledges that there is evidence that Islamic dress is being imposed on sections of the female Islamic community. And I have two hearsay evidences of people that I know who've told me stories where they've been harassed in the streets because they haven't dressed. One was by a very liberal Muslim Somali girl who, she saw Islam. She was one of the minority of voices that sought to modernize Islam and wanted a reformed Islam. But she told me that she used to be harassed because she wouldn't dress in traditional Somali clothes. And the other one was a Christian girl who used to get being mistaken. She was actually from Mexico, but she looked like she was from maybe North Africa. And she used to get harassed by Muslims who used to come up to her and tell her that she wasn't dressed decently because she was dressed, like a Western European. And by the way, I never saw her dressed indecently. She just wore jeans. Now, whilst there the report notes that there are other examples, like a woman needing the permission of her husband to leave her house. Now, these are examples that the report encountered as the dame was going around and doing her report. These were examples of people that she met that told her, and she's just got a few examples here. She encountered an example of a woman who had her rights to move abroad and around the country restricted based upon what her husband wanted. And the report also noted that there were Muslims seeking to boycott music festivals and urging their community to do so. The report also noted that that there were examples of mosques and sections of the Muslim community being bullied by other sections of the Muslim community. Now, it doesn't say who, but I would put my betting money on something like a Shia-Sunni kind of rivalry, or everybody gang up on the Ahmadiyya kind of rivalry, or everybody bully the Sufis. Because the thing is, like, to the uninitiated, you can look at Islam and you can think it's just a homogenous group. But to those of us that have been involved in dealing with Islam for many years, we recognize that actually Islam has many sects and many divisions. And actually, there's a lot of infighting going on within the Islamic world. The report also goes on to note, as a sort of catch-all right at the end of this section, that there are other forms of retrobate kind of regressive attitudes within the Sikh community who have been disrupting mixed marriages, within Christian communities who go around trying to cure people of homosexuality, and within the Jewish community where Orthodox Jews are telling women that their role is to be wives and mothers. So that's kind of the report and the exchange with multiculturalism. And so now I want to turn to and start to refocus and turn our attention towards a couple of things. And just before I move on to the point about a Christian politics, we want to talk about very quickly where this emphasis on multiculturalism emerged. It emerged in 2006 when the Tony Blair government decided to open up the floodgates to mass immigration. It was not the first time that a political party in government has done things that weren't in its manifesto and didn't give people a choice. The Conservatives do it as well. So, you know, every political party does this, but I'm just explaining where the roots are. So you open up the doors to mass immigration, lots of people come in, you then got diversity. And Tony Blair was ideologically committed, these are his words, that no distinctive culture or religion supersedes our duty to be part of an integrated United Kingdom. And in that same speech, which he gave Our Nation's Future, Multiculturalism and Integration, which he delivered on the 8th of December 2006, he went on to articulate the view that beyond thin values such as tolerance and equal treatment for all, the primacy of British culture did not really matter. Now, Andrew Neither, who was an advisor to Tony Blair in this period, is on record as saying that the point of mass immigration and multiculturalism, get this, was to rub the right's nose in diversity and to render their arguments out of date. So in other words, they were changing and transforming our culture because of their political rivalry with the Conservative Party or with the right spectrum as a whole. And it's a strategy that has largely succeeded, as Peter Hitchens, the social commentator, has noted himself, journalist and social commentator. But the thing is, by 2011, everybody knew that it wasn't working. We all know that it's not working, and discussion is still being suppressed about it. David Cameron stated in a speech that he gave in Munich in 2011, "We have even tolerated the doctrine of state multiculturalism has even tolerated these segregated communities behaving in ways that run counter to our values. David Cameron is on record as saying that multiculturalism didn't work. His Grace Nazia Ali also is on record as saying that multiculturalism doesn't work. And there are a number of social commentators that have pointed out that multiculturalism doesn't work. It's not just me. There's a whole spectrum of people that have identified that multiculturalism doesn't work. Samuel Burgess, in his book Edmund Burke's Battle with Liberalism, states this: the attempt to forge a multicultural society failed because a society needs to feel itself to be a society. The perception of a shared heritage, history, and trajectory creates the sinews of kinship that facilitate the muscle movements of democracy. Citizens must know and care about their fellow citizens and feel that in some sense their fates are interlinked, an idea captured in the phrase "e pluribus unum," out of the many, one. And it is exactly that is the model of Christian multiculturalism. E pluribus unum, out of the many, one. The church brings the many to be one. That is how we create the Confederacy of Christian Peoples, where a Anglo-Saxon Christian has affinity and allegiance to an Ethiopian Christian, who has an affinity and an allegiance to a Lebanese Christian, who has an affinity and an allegiance to a Pakistani Christian, who has an affinity and allegiance to an Egyptian Christian, who has an affinity and allegiance to an American Christian, who has an affinity and an allegiance to a Russian Christian, and so on and so on and so on in ad nauseum. And I want to stress that our understanding of multiculturalism and our rejection of liberal multiculturalism as Christians should never be confused with a rejection of multi-ethnicism. Multi-ethnicism is great, got no problem with it. Multiculturalism, as understood and practiced by liberalism, is bad. It doesn't work. We have a form of multiculturalism. The out of the many comes the one. Out of the many Christian peoples comes the one Christian identity that we all share in and that we're all richer for sharing in that. And that's multi-ethnic. And so we mustn't confuse our narrative as Christians with that of the alt-right or with that of the alt-left. It is a distinctively Christian position. I'm nearly done, guys. I'm nearly done with the presentation. So I'm just going to basically outline now a sketch of the beginnings of a Christian politics to get the conversation going, and then we'll go into the talk, which will be DM'd, emceed by JC. So maternity and secular liberalism want to reduce the church, that is Christian peoples as organized in their institutions, to the role of that of merely being an alms-giving, ritual-providing, civic bond to liberal society. This is the acceptable role for the church within society. Whilst not all of that is bad, we should reject that offer because that is not the full Christian faith. That is not the role of the church. We're not here to serve the state. We're here to serve Jesus. Christians must tell their own history, or others will tell it for us to our disadvantage. And that has been a constant failing of the church in terms of its discourse with wider society, is it's never told its own history from a Christian perspective. Christians must be conscious of what is civic religion. That is religion which serves the end of the state and is about cultural dressings upon a liberal progressive narrative or upon a liberal narrative. Real Christianity, by contrast, is about being a disciple of Jesus and changing your whole way of life to suit him, his church, and his kingdom. Christians must consciously reject religions of humanity. What do I mean by that? That is a kind of religiosity that builds its sense of identity upon a common humanity, instead of consciously cultivating, which is what we should be doing, a religion of difference. What do I mean by that? A religion of difference is that which cultivates a culture and identity that makes Christians unique and different to the world around them. And that is what we should be doing, because religions of difference eat for breakfast religions of humanity. Be in no doubt, if we embrace a religion of difference, the religions of humanity will get chewed up by us. Christians should oppose Islamization, but we shouldn't be paranoid about Islamization. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there is also liberalization, sexualization, and a whole bunch of isations as well that are taking people away from the Christian faith. But we can only do this if we are doing it based upon a Christian identity, and that requires a vision for political action. We can begin by evangelizing, as a start, all the red-pilled conservatives, all the Trumpian conservatives, all the Brexit conservatives. Like, they have political knowledge and the muscle that the church has long since lost because of our emasculated, effeminized, cooked bishops. But we can get some of that back by converting some of these red-pilled conservatives that have got some testosterone. And it's a well-needed injection of testosterone, if you ask me. Christians, as well as cultivating what makes us unique and different, must also be keen to convert everyone to the faith using the media, the state, politics, economics, laws, law enforcement, courts, and the arts, as well as doing normal evangelism that we think of when we think of evangelism. This requires a vision that sees all of these tools as useful and seeks to use them. Christians need to cultivate individually and collectively a spirituality that is robust, dynamic, creative, and above all, comfortable with conflict. Because if we're not comfortable with conflict, there's no hope of winning at all. Christians must recognize that Salafist Islam is one of the chief opponents in the world today in every way. Much like communism was one of the chief opponents of the Christian faith during the Cold War. Well, the Cold War is over, communism has come and gone. Now there's a new opponent. We must recognize the state is governed by an ideology that, due to its conflation of race, culture, and religion, cannot and will not oppose Islamic revivalism, no matter what it stands for. That ideology has to be replaced with a self-assured, self-confident Christianity. And that's the problem within the church. Most Christians have lost their confidence that Christianity is actually the answer that society needs. The church needs to cultivate a sense of Christian identity built upon Christian doctrine, Christian values, Christian history, and then finding ways to allow that matrix to express itself in cultural norms, in how we do society, in how we dress, in how we do art, in how we do community, in how we tell our history, in how we express ourselves, in how we engage with politics, instilling pride in it. Thus, the basis of, and this will provide the basis from which a Christian politics can emerge. Now, why do we need this? Why do we need to re-envision this idea of a Christian politics? Well, it's simple. Since the fall of Constantinople in the 15th century and the Peace of Westphalia in the 17th century, I think, or was it the 16th century, Christians have lacked a Christian political vision for society, which means that the ideas where the emperor was a Christian who ruled the secular world, and then we had a patriarch or a pope who ruled the matters of religion, that vision for society is gone. It's never coming back. And people that are striving to get it back are just misguided. We've got to start from where we are, which is in the shattered remains of modernity, where church has been on the back foot for the last 300 years, and we now need to get back on the front foot. But how do we do that? We've got to have a narrative that all Christians can start to work from and work towards. And I'm going to give two essential narratives that every Christian of every denomination in every country and at every level of society can commit themselves to. Number one, solidarity with the persecuted church. Christians must have solidarity with other Christians, especially when those Christians are being persecuted. Number two, the church triumphant, overall and in all. That means overall its ideological opponents and in every sphere that it is required to be triumphant, whether that be society, economics, or politics, or law. And that is the basis of a Christian political narrative. So I'm going to let JC in, I'm going to let the Sheikh in, and then JC is going to, hopefully, if his technology is working, he's going to bring in questions from you, the audience. If you want to bring in your questions, and we'll start having a conversation, and we've got an hour to do it. So over to you, JC.
Okay, I should be doing the moderator here, being the curator, but you have Bob Sila's presentation of the audience, very thorough, as you would expect from Bob Sila. To all those non-Christians who might think that Bob Sila is talking nonsense, he just embellishing these things, he just discussing this in a way that is going to support his Christian narrative, we'd like to give you the opportunity to come and challenge his views. So Bob Sila, if you can maybe, I mean, the only person who can copy the link to join the live chat is yourself. So if you maybe like to copy the link so that anybody that wants to refute your points, they can jump on board. Let me just fix my camera. Excellent.
It should just be said that the aim is not just to find those people that want to refute. If you want to talk and expand the conversation, maybe you agree, but you want to nuances.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the whole point is to encourage dialogue. And obviously, if you like to make a point which is relevant to the topic, then we'll obviously welcome you to refute those points. But obviously, any personal attacks will not be tolerated, especially since we are here to conduct ourselves professionally and academically. So, if you could just share the link.
I will. And I just want to give balance, because I know JC's looking for the controversy, the discussion points. But as I say, if there are people that want to talk about the nuances of the argument, that they're won over to the argument, that they agree, but they want to go into some of what that means, then we can talk about that as well.
Of course.
How are you doing, Sheikh?
For you, Christian, as well. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, Bob. God bless you.
God bless you as well, brother. Peace be with you.
With you too. It's very interesting. It's very interesting to talk about this, because this is the situation we live in Lebanon. For those who doesn't know me, I'm a Christian Lebanese from the Middle East, and this is what we suffer from. As you said before, brother Bob, the ethnical mix is something great. It's not when we say we're against the mix of cultures, people would call us racists and all kind of names. So it's good that you highlighted that. The problem is every culture can take an identification for itself, religiously or politically or just any way of life they want to adopt. They can call themselves a culture. So,
well, I mean, let's just think about that, because the church is. We've got to be clear about our terms, because this often lets us down. People have been informed by secular liberalism about how to talk about these topics, and the thing is, we shouldn't confuse culture with ethnicity, and we shouldn't confuse ethnicity with religion. These are three separate categories, and it's a category mistake to mix them up. Yes, there is overlap. Yes, there is synergy between those three categories. There's definite overlap. No one can deny that. But the reality is that these are separate categories, and they can and do act independently of one another. And so when I am saying as Christians that we are against the idea of multiculturalism, what I'm saying is we're against the idea of liberal progressive multiculturalism. Christians have been practicing multiculturalism for 2,000 years. There is no one on earth that can lecture us about what it means to be multicultural, because we've been multicultural since we started.
Amen.
We don't need any talks. We don't need any lectures. We could give lectures. We could actually help the liberal progressives to know what it takes to create a multicultural society, because the church is a multicultural society. And what does a multicultural society need? It needs common values and common doctrines and a common sense of history. That is how you build a multicultural society. Liberalism cannot give us that, because what it says is you've all got your own histories, you've all got your own values, you've all got your own beliefs. But what we want you to be is to emphasize all the things that you've got in common. Right. And these are very different. These are very different things. Nada, you said that this is your forte, so why don't you jump on the chat, love? So I mean, I would just say, Sheikh, that for me personally, as I was fomenting these ideas about a muscular Christianity, it was actually amongst my inspirations the Lebanese church that inspired me, because your community, the Lebanese Christian church, has survived over 1,000 years in a hostile environment, and sometimes you've come out the victors over that history. And you've managed to cohesively keep your own identity and essentially your own land up until very recent times, up until just after the Civil War.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that, the Lord help us on one hand to survive and come out victorious, and on the other hand, we be attacked by the international media, calling us the ferocious terrorists and the ones that have no mercy. And this is another kind of persecution after they persecute you for real, kill you and drag you around the country while you're trying to protect yourself and your beloved ones. Once you prevail, they go out in the media to slander you because you prevailed. Sorry, go ahead.
And this is why Christians need to recognize that there is a role for Christians seizing the heights of media, for us to set the narrative of the media. If we can set the narrative of the media and bend them to our will, then they can be a tool that is of use to us. If we can get key people into those institutions to use their influence for the benefit by lensing and focusing in on Christian concerns and Christian causes, it will draw people in to those causes and thus draw them towards Christ. And this is, I guess you're focusing more on the present, but I was actually speaking, Sheikh, about the Lebanese past. the fact that the Lebanese Christian community, up until just after the Civil War, had actually managed to not only survive, but sometimes prosper and grow and look after itself and secure its own identity. And for me, that was very inspirational. You know, the Lebanese church, the Serbian church, the Sudanese church, the Kachin Christians of Burma, the Filipino Christians, you know, the whole of, you know, the great struggle, the Romanian Christians, the Hungarian Christians, the Polish Christians, the great struggle against the Ottoman Empire is the inspiration behind this idea of a muscular Christianity, which is the answer to this effeminized, failing liberalism that we've got today. I'm going to let in JC if you want to jump in at any point. If I'm going to let in Aquiladen. Okay, bro. Aquiladen, how are you?
Good enough. Can't complain.
Good.
You can hear me well enough, right?
Yeah. What would you like to say?
Nothing so far. I'd like to wait to see what everyone else wants to talk about, actually.
Okay, fair
That's
enough.
right.
Yep, sure. I think Nada, are you going to jump on? In terms of, are there any questions? People write their questions and just put them to as at me, and then what I'll do is I'll put them on the screen and we'll talk about them from there. But I think the thing is, what we've got to recognise is that the Aquiladen, could you mute your mic because I'm getting feedback?
Sorry.
Thank you. In terms of we've got to recognise that the world has got used to Christians being the doormats of society. So when Christians stop being the doormats of society, the world is not going to the world is not going to be happy. The world is not going to welcome it. The world is not going to pat you on the back. It's going to villainize you. But remember, brothers and sisters, the saints are often seen as the criminals, the outcasts, the social pariahs. If you look through the canon of saints, if you look at hagiography and hagiographic writing about the holies, very often they were criminalized by their societies. They were seen as the bad guys, but we celebrate them as saints. You know, most saints were considered crooks in their own time. They were considered the bad people in their own time. And that's the difference between wishy-washy, God is my sugar daddy and I carry my comfort mattress Christianity, and the Jesus Christ, you know, wear your crown of thorns, carry your cross, be my disciple kind of Christianity comes in. So I've got a question. All right, it's not a question, it's a statement. So are there any questions with regards to this topic? But so as well as separating ourselves from what we were, we've got to recognize what we've become and how we got here. But then we've got to separate ourselves that and say that from this day forward, we've got to work from where we're at, you know, and we're not working towards, in this short to medium term, creating a Christian society. At this moment in time, we're more talking about creating a Christian church, which is this idea of a church triumphant and a church in solidarity with itself, particularly those who are being persecuted. And, you know, like at this exact moment in time, whilst we are speaking, in South Kaduna State in Nigeria, there are thousands of Christians being butchered. Is the world talking about it? Why not?
No.
Why not? Go on, Aquiladen. Do you want us to speak?
I also wanted to point out that a good percentage of that butchering of Christians in Nigeria are also kind of being done by the Christians as well. Just pointing that out.
Okay, what's your source for that, bro?
Unfortunately, I don't have one on hand to just share with everyone in chat, but I do know that genital female female genital mutilation in Nigeria is done just as much by the Christians
No, bro,
in that
that's
country.
not what no, bro, you've misunderstood. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in South Kaduna State, there's an actual war being fought against the Christian community, and they're being driven from their homes in the thousands. So I think you need to make sure you know what we're talking about, because I'm not talking about genital mutilation. I'm talking
just
about
saying that the problems in Nigeria go beyond that as well.
the biggest problem for Christians is that they're being driven from their homes and killed and raped.
Of course.
That's
and the reason why
biggest
no one
problem.
talks about it is because, if I'm being honest, I don't think anyone truly cares. I mean, how often do you hear it spoken about?
Exactly.
In fact, Africa in general. How often do you hear Africa spoken about in general?
It's not just in Africa.
Unless it's to play on certain people's guilt strings.
Yeah, it's not just in Africa though. It's in the Middle East. You know, the Assyrian Christians have suffered terribly. The Lebanese Christians. We've got Christians from northern Cyprus that still can't go to their homes.
I think I'm aware of the Lebanese Christians. Shakespeare, if that's the same Shakespeare I'm thinking of, me and him have spoken about it before.
Yeah, you've also got Christians in South Serbia, you've got Christians in Armenia, you've got Christians in Burma, Christians in North Korea, Christians in the South
Serbia, are you talking about Kosovo?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
where Christian land was robbed by the international community, Christians were driven from their homes, and there was a land grab. You know, there's you know, there is this global problem of persecution, and because our bishops are weak, and because they are slaves to the liberal state,
and because your Pope kind of soldiers out.
Aquilade, when you're not talking, bro, could you mute your mic, please?
So sorry.
Like because our bishops are weak, then what they have done, they have slavishly just gone along with whatever is the event of their day. So, for example, we've seen bishops in the Church of England more vocal about the Cummings guy, the advisor to Boris Johnson, than we have about the persecution of Christians anywhere. Does anyone remember the Bishop of Manchester talking about the persecution of Christians in other places? You know, the reason why they don't talk is because they don't have a Christian political narrative that is based upon the idea of Christians being in solidarity with other Christians. And that means that we, the laity of the church, the people on the ground, need to re-envision what it means to be a Christian in the 21st century, in a world where no one has our back. Not the UN, not the EU, not the nation state, nobody. And we've got to do things like, you know, you've got the president in Hungary, in Olbrand. We've got to think outside of the box to deal with these kinds of problems. Sheikh, were you coming in to say anything? Again, guys, if you want to talk, if you want to ask a question, just put it at me, towards me, and then as I see it, I'll bring it up to talk about it. Go on, Sheikh.
I wanted to say if I do that call publicly here in Lebanon for Christians to be to be solid with each other, I'll be in jail the next morning, if not the same night, because I will be accused of causing disunity in the nation of Lebanon. Only by asking the Christians to be solid with each other, I can be accused of that. And I don't know if that's the standard everywhere, but this is the standard.
I know in the UK that freedom of speech is getting shut down. It's getting increasingly censored, and that we need to find ways to push back against that. What I would say is you've got to box smart. You know, box clever, you know, fight smart, like use your brain. You like work around what you can to achieve what you can. And then collectively, if we're all pushing in the same direction, eventually we'll gain space for ourselves. You know, I'm going to let in Kay. Okay. How are we doing, Kay?
Hi.
Peaceful with you?
Yeah, you too. I've got to admit I didn't hear all of your presentation.
Oh dear.
But,
Well, you can't stay then.
I can listen to this. I think my ideas differ slightly from your, like our interpretations are slightly different, but I would say that obviously the kingdom of Christ is far superior to any ideas of a nation, although God does take seriously the idea of nationhood, especially, you know, around Israel and stuff like that. I think that Hungary, especially, I've been very encouraged by their stance on all things EU and immigration. And, you know, they're not joking. They have a mandate from their people. Their people have said, no, thank you very much. We don't want any of this, you know, other cultures being equal, other cultures being, regardless. So multiculturalism, especially in England, is basically any culture at all is equal, whether they stone women to death, whether they, you know, whatever their practices, they are equal. But our own culture is denigrated to the point of like this post-colonial guilt trip thing. I don't know what it is, but I would say that Christians everywhere need to ignore the mainstream, speak to Christians in the countries if possible. Like before I met Shakespeare, like I wouldn't, unfortunately, I didn't really, you know, if I'd have looked on maybe the BBC website, I wouldn't have got the same story that he's giving me. I would have been told it's a half Christian, half Muslim country. There's no jizya, there's no, do you know what I mean? Like it, I think it's very important for us to get the voices of Christians and give their own testimony as to how it is in their lands and whether or not they.
We've got to start telling our own story as Christians, because
Yeah.
everyone is telling our story for us, and we're just letting them. Why are we letting non-Christians define for us what is Christian behavior? Why are we letting non-Christians define for us how we should understand Christian history? Why are we letting
we're not solid with each other. Sorry to interrupt. Because we're not solid with each other.
I think this is all part of it. It's because we don't have any. We haven't had a political vision for society or for ourselves for over 100 years, and the reality is that has meant that Christians have got no basis to be solid with one another. And that's why the idea of Christian solidarity is absolutely crucial, and it goes beyond any allegiance to the nation state.
Right. I see that the story of nations and of peoples and descendants of certain historical characters, I think it is valued and essential for the narrative of redemption. I don't think that I think that for a very good reason, certain people are born in certain places because they can live, you know, they can help to, I don't know, bring fellowship to their people. So it's going to be a very different experience to be a Christian in Pakistan today than it is even in Pakistan 1,000 years ago, but especially like growing up in England today. So I think nationhood is important because the Christianity in Pakistan won't be the Christianity that's in England, because Christianity doesn't subjugate peoples. It comes and it works on the hearts of the individuals there who already have their own culture. And that is why I believe that culture is so very important, because I wouldn't want an Italian Christian to have to bow down to any Anglican form of Christianity. Do you see what I mean? Like, I think cultures and languages and histories are so very important.
I guess what I'm saying is that when an Italian Christian and an English Christian come together and work together, they create a more Christian community, a more Christian culture, and they bring their Italianness and their Englishness together within the confederacy of what it is to be church. And in the sense of nations, I think it's the hardest thing for people to hear is this idea that like your nation is not as important as the church, and because it's so ingrained in us, this idea of belonging to a land, when actually the scriptures, I would say, you belong to a heavenly kingdom, that you belong to a heavenly home. Exactly, yeah. Exiles in this land, which means
but we should still wait patiently and worship God, but also adopt it. God says we should adopt the ways of you know, where
let
we're
me just finish my point. Let me just finish my point
Yeah.
and then come back, Kay. So in terms of being exiles in this land, then that means that our sense of belonging is more to one another as Christians than it is to do with any nation state, and that our culture, we need to emerge a Christian culture from Christian doctrine, Christian values, and a Christian sense of history. We need to have our own culture as Christians, as opposed to British culture or Italian culture or Hungarian culture. But I'm often encouraged by what's going on in Hungary as well. Do you want to come back on that, Kay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to take questions from everyone who's listening.
Very briefly. So the idea of Christian culture, I'm all for it, and yet I see beauty in Eastern Orthodoxy. I also see it in Roman Catholicism. I see it in Anglicanism. I see it in Methodism. Like, I see it in all variants of Christianity. Christianity is correct, but there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ, and yet they have traditions and, like, I don't know, liturgies and stuff that I think is special to that place. And if we're exiles here, even though you're talking about the earth, I can still see, you know, somebody in Serbia, for example, as a Christian with a different culture and tradition and language, which I value, and I'm glad that it's there because it makes us stronger as one nation under God, as it were. So,
okay.
Thanks, Bob.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the questions up that people have come up. I'm going to ask one of you guys to read it, and then all of you get like a minute to answer the question that's directed to me. Okay. So who Aquilian, do you want to go first?
Okay. You mentioned, hang on. You mentioned Muslims think it should be illegal to be homosexual. What do you think? Well, Bob, what do you think?
Well, what?
Or do you want me to answer that?
You're invited to give your opinion.
What do I think?
If you don't feel confident to talk on these topics, maybe you should step off so we can let someone else in.
Illegal, probably not, but not encouraged, not celebrated to the degree that we're seeing it lately. I think that's going a bit overboard. It's a bit sick, actually.
Yeah. Sheikh?
Yeah, about homosexuality, well, in my personal opinion, it used to work well when it was illegal in Lebanon to be homosexual. And now it's still illegal, but there's so many transgenders and homosexual people. As long as they be whatever they want to be in their own bed, they can live with me, as in, I'm talking under the line of multiculturalism. I'm not going to be upset that I have a fellow homosexual Lebanese, while I have a fellow Muslim Lebanese that want to kill me.
Yeah, I think there's, you know, like, I don't think it's a case that there's one answer to every issue and every question, and I think this particular question is far more complicated than the dynamics of the question allow. So to bluntly answer the blunt question, no, I don't think it should be made illegal at all. But that doesn't mean that you know, that it should be celebrated or that we should take pride in it, but at the same time we shouldn't villainize either. You know, I think that it's a massive topic. It's not a simple topic, and so simple binary answers that are painted in simple black and white strokes just don't do the question justice.
As a Christian, this is something that calls me to preach for this person and help him if I can, or her. Not to demonize those people or fight them, or.
So, Sheikh, we're just doing one response to each question, so that we can get around everyone and move on to the next question. So, Kay?
Yeah, I think that I don't think Britain suffered greatly when it was illegal. I think it was still practiced widely. It was, you know. But I also think that we don't legislate against everything that's a sin. So if we see it in terms of it's no greater or lesser than other, like, carnal sins, that I think would maybe put it into perspective for us. If Muslims want it to be illegal, it's because of Sharia and it's because of the Bible. But our laws, whilst based on the Bible loosely now, are not stemming from them. They're coming from a civil code. So in that respect, I'm very wary of paedophilia and LGBT stuff all being lumped in together. I don't think it's something to be celebrated or paraded around. It's a private matter. If somebody, if two grown people want to do that stuff, that's fine. But yeah, I don't call for it to be illegalized, but I know that he hasn't changed his mind, put it that way.
Yeah, God has not changed his mind. So next question. Sheikh, do you want to go first on this one?
I can answer that. It's about the abuse of women.
Okay, let Sheikh.
It's about
Sheikh
women, Bob. Okay.
And Sheikh still going first. Go on, Sheikh.
Okay. Don't you think that understood as women are weak?
Do you want to formulate your answer on that one, Sheikh?
Yeah. Please.
Fair enough. Go on, Kay.
Please go ahead.
Right. I think that the difference is that the person who's asking the question maybe hasn't picked up on masculine Christianity. So men and women are Christian. God says he created man, male and female, he created them. So a masculine form of Christianity, whilst the terminology, looks towards men, women can be masculine in terms of assertiveness and of strength and the good qualities of masculinity. They can be brave and courageous and protective towards the church. So I've never sat and listened to Bob say that and thought, hold on a minute. I don't know of any women who were put off. I was encouraged to come to the park after seeing Bob discussing this actual topic and then meeting him outside of the park. So as a woman, no. And I don't understand women to be weak. You've only got to watch one giving birth to know that that's not the case.
Yeah, that's very true. The question seems to me more about the language. It's kind of like this idea of masculine Christianity vis-a-vis effeminacy. And does that put off women because it's portraying women as weak? Kate, if you just bear with us.
I thought you were asking a question.
For me, it's a case of understanding what I mean by this. What I'm saying is that the church is very comfortable in expressing the effeminate part of its faith, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything bad in emphasizing the ideas of caring and healing and teaching and those very noble effeminate qualities. But it has forgotten the idea of the masculine side, the idea of standing against evil, standing up for what is right, defending your community, taking and shouldering responsibility and taking leadership. It's being very poor at expressing those noble masculine traits, and that's what I'm referring to when I talk about masculine Christianity. But it's a fair point, Gina, and maybe something I need to think about in the way that I try to explain it. Kiliden, do you want to have a crack at this?
Aquiliden. The simple answer, no. No. I don't.
Okay.
No.
Sheikh, have you thought about what you want to say?
Yeah, it's. I can't give any answer but a biblical answer. This question usually pops out of a person that is not really well knowledge about Christianity or about the Bible. So when you explain this to the person that is asking you the question, you explain what the Bible really says about men and women in the Bible. This will be cleared out. So the question is coming from someone that doesn't know the Bible.
Just before we go on to the next topic, I'm going to actually defend Gina because I think that her question is about my use of language as opposed to anything theological, to be fair. And if there are other people like Nada, I really want you to come on, that want to come on to the show, then do jump in. Let's have a look. Are there any other questions? Next, you've already asked one. Here we go. So I'll go first on this one. There's more than two incidences, actually. There's quite a number, and you know, we're finding a bunch, and I do hope to invite some of the people that are responsible for these instances to do a live debate to defend their positions. And for me, it is syncretism, plain and simple. It's the mixing of truth with falsehood, and it's making a false declaration. And for Christians, we should not be allowing buildings that are the temple of the church to be used for anything other than for the service of the church. And especially, we should not be worshipping together as if we are worshipping a common God, because we're not. Theologically, they're different. And there'd be loads of Muslims that would come on board and agree with this. You know, like, our vision of Yahweh is not the Muslims' vision of Allah. These are different visions of who God is. And to pretend that that is not the case, that we are all worshipping somehow the same God, in the sense of the giant elephant in the room amongst the blind men who are feeling different parts of it, you know, it's just plain old syncretism. And it, again, is coming from the idea that one's theology is being influenced by secular liberal politics, rather than our politics being influenced by our theology. Kay, do you want to? How would you respond to that comment?
I'm very troubled. So, in terms of using church buildings for any other purpose, I would obviously just put the caveat, not, I don't know, hurricane relief or feeding the poor, or like other non-Christian, Christian enterprises, but like with anyway. But the worship of Allah in a church is literally an abomination. I think it's a God who sets himself up through Muhammad as a rival to, or a usurper and an imposter. Like, I don't think that the bishops genuinely believe in the Abrahamic line. I think if they do, where have they been all of this time? How have they not looked into it? Don't they know about Luke 16? Like, I don't see how they can make space for a new prophet when the Bible is so very clear about the line of prophets, where it ends, when it ends, and what we are to do with any false prophets who arise. I'm very troubled by it. I think that the Church of England especially is becoming so ineffectual as to be a joke, and that is the church I was baptized into. I don't say it lightly. I would love to have you speak to them, Bob, and I'm going to help try to arrange some sort of just holding to account, just as one Christian to another. Like, what are you on about? You know, just ask them, how do you think this is helping Christians who would love to go and worship, and yet their church is unfortunately busy with all the pews taken out of the way, and there just so happen to be media there every single time. Isn't it odd? Like, isn't it odd that we've got photos of Muslims praying on the floor of the church?
Yeah, and they're obviously using that to promote a certain narrative, and then unthinkingly, lots of Christians buy into that narrative because they don't have a political narrative to counter it, which is why we need a Christian political narrative. But just before I let Sheikh and Aquilid talk about this, I just want to say that I've kicked the bearded bloke Nex out of the chat because it's proving to be a distraction from the topic. If you guys want to engage with him in your own lives, do that. But I'm just tired of him taking over the chat every time that I do a show. He just doesn't get the message. I think he's got an unhealthy obsession with me, and he needs to move on with his life for his benefit as well as for everybody else's. If there is anyone who wants to jump on the chat, please do. Aquilade, with regards to the question, your thoughts?
No, first I've ever heard of this, Muslims praying in churches. First I've ever heard of that. I've seen Muslims praying on streets, taking up roads and side streets, which always struck me as a bit of a statement, demonstration of numbers, influence, power, or something like that. But praying in churches, this is the first I've heard of it. Okay, well,
Aquilade, it seems that there's a lot you've got to catch up on in terms of the politics that's going off in the world. Sheikh, your thoughts on this?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a clear invasion. I wouldn't call it anything less than an invasion. it reminds me of Jesus getting in the temple and breaking the stands of the exchangers, not for worshipping idols in his father's place, but for exchanging money, let alone praying for Allah that tells people that Jesus never died even. So you go to Jesus' house to speak bad about him? No.
Yeah, I think it's a loss of a Christian identity and a Christian vision. Sorry, I'm going back on what I've said. So I'll bring up the next question. Let me just find it. I did see it, but I think the chat's moved it up the hill a bit. Let's have a look. Where was it? There we go. Again, guys, I'll just share the invite if people want to come on board. There we go. That's the link. Nader, I really do want you to come on board. So who was going to go first? I guess we'll just do the round again. So the question is, Christians are being put down by the government. Are you just going to complain about it, or are you going to organize and get people running for government? Well, actually, Samuel, I mean, you don't know half of my life, mate. I've been active in all different kinds of ways politically for the faith. And the thing is, it's kind of like each of us have to do our little bit, and to do our bit of the overall picture. It's not, it's not the responsibility of every person to do the same. I certainly would encourage Christians to get involved in, for instance, the Christian People's it's now called the Christian Parties Alliance in the UK, and I'm sure there's a Christian equivalent in different countries. And wherever you are in the world, I would encourage you to get involved in Christian political initiatives. However, for me, I think the champion of the Christian community at the moment in the UK is Christian Concern. They're doing a far better job of it than even the bishops. So support that organization, support groups like the Barnabas Fund. But then we need more. There needs to be more. I do think Christians should run for politics. I do think Christians should have a Christian political agenda, and they should aim to win incremental battles to secure Christian space. So an example of that would be not to ban working on a Sunday, but just to win the right that Christians don't have to work on a Sunday. And it's these kind of incremental steps that it gradually build up to and then explode in a shift of culture. And that's what we've seen since the 1960s. There were little victories, incremental victories won by the forces of liberalism that were permitted, that then have exploded into the culture that we're now living in. Well, we can reverse that trend by winning individual little battles. And those little battles build up to a shift in the culture. So, Kay, your thoughts?
Hi. Right. So what I would say is it's not just our government, and we're not being told the truth. Our government admitted as recently only as I think last year that Christianity is the most persecuted religion globally. And the numbers are pretty shocking. And that's atheistic countries, Muslim countries, and also so-called Christian countries that are doing this persecution. It's not always state-sponsored. It's often just like a culture. I think that our government also has unfortunately persecuted Christians to the extent that there was one guy, I think he was Pakistani, he was a former Muslim, and he applied for asylum, which would have been straightforward had he remained a Muslim. But on headed Home Office notepaper, the embassy of his country wrote to him and quoted the Old Testament to refute his claim that he was afraid for his life and Christianity Christian Britain would be a place of sanctuary for him. He was basically told, well, you better trust in Jesus then, literally, and left where he was. So it's not just our government who are putting Christians down, and that our government there are some excellent Christians in our Conservative government at the moment. Jacob Rees-Mogg is one of them. Boris Johnson is ostensibly a Christian. So I think that it's not, I don't think it's on paper a government policy at all, but I think pro-Islamic narratives are held on to for fear of being witch hunted in the media, for fear of being called an Islamophobe even. You wouldn't want to be called the other thing. Yeah, so I don't think it's just a government. And if we were to organise, I think it should be along the lines of the Green Party, whereby we don't take power, but the Green Party have managed to infiltrate and influence the mainstream or the main parties in very beneficial ways for their agenda. So they don't have to run, they don't have to spend the money, but their causes and things that are dear to them have become, you know, a sensible option for those people to have in their manifestos.
Okay. Sheikh, your thoughts? Should Christians organize politically?
The little battles you spoke about. Media is one thing that we spoke about priorly. The media will help a lot. Stopping the media from attacking the Christians and allowing them to raise their voice will be a great battle, not a small battle. Like, this is something Christians in Lebanon need. If someone needs to know how to help instead of just complaining about it, we need media coverage. We need the backup of the media so we can start aiming to the full government.
Yeah, I'm constantly tempted to come back in, but that's not what we're saying. What about you, Aquilade? No, it's all right. So was that all that you wanted to say on that, Sheikh?
Yeah, almost. Going through those little battles that we can win, media, then to the government, we can establish something like a connection between all Christians in all countries. Because so far it's like a blurry. You don't know who to contact to help. You don't know what to do if you really want to help.
Okay. Aquilade, your thoughts?
Probably won't be my best answer, but I've already seen Christians organizing and voting and getting people running for office and whatnot. The problem is, no matter what politician we vote on that seems promising, they always end up being exactly the same thing. So, yeah, we should organize and yeah, we should get people in the government, but give me a candidate that we should vote for. That won't let us down like every other one did. Even Donald Trump, to some degree, is starting to flunk on some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think this is an important point that I am just going to break my own rules because it is my show and it is my channel.
Yeah, do what you like, man. Go talk away.
I think the reality is that we can't expect Christians who are part of the mainstream liberal parties, once they get in power, to be able to walk the course of being a Christian. You know, Jacob Rees-Mogg is ultimately someone who has decided that his faith is a private affair, not something that will influence his political agenda. And even though he's appeared on the media multiple times, he's never used it to, or he's very, very rarely and insignificantly used it to draw attention to the plight of Christians who are being persecuted. And I think, you know, Christians should be weary of giving people like Trump a blank check. You know, we should expect things from him for our support, and we should demand things of him for our support. And that one of those things should be greater assistance and aid for persecuted Christians. And because he is the president of America, I would go so far as saying helping to establish a Christian state in the Middle East, maybe through, you know, the breakup of Syria, which is, you know, on the cards, or the breakup of Iraq, or even just, you know, supporting the Christian base in Lebanon, and helping Christians to settle in Lebanon from all around the Middle East, and you know, that could be done through all kinds of different things. But we should definitely expect more from our politicians for our support, and that's the way democracy works. If you're a visible consumer, the political classes will bend round you to get your vote. They will steal some agenda points of yours to get your vote. It's the same with consumerism. Consumerism bends around the visible consumer, and so it produces things that then creates a culture based around the consumers that it's helped to fashion and that are there. I just want to bring in the next question. Let's have a look. That's okay. What's this?
I love that song.
Right. Do you want to go Aqualaden first?
Okay. Sorry, just let me read the question.
Yeah. I see you, Theodosius. You're up next.
Not the one. But the one.
Not the current Pope. No, I regard the current Pope as a traitor, actually. That's all I'll say on that.
Okay, Kay, you're up.
Unfortunately, this Pope, I don't have much respect for his. I respect his office, I guess. I don't respect him as a person after I've heard some of the things that he's pondered and considered as the head of, like, the Catholic Church. I don't think he's doing half as good a job as, the one before last, who, even though he kissed the Quran, I kind of liked him. I don't think the earth deserves any kind of Pope. I think that the church is built on Christ. I think that Catholics also believe that deep down. So, no, I don't think he's ever going to be a hero. To me, he's a bit of an anti-hero. He's considering, like, homosexuality not a sin. He's talking, he was considering the marriage of priests, and I mean, they're not biblical, like, that's not a biblical thing, I guess, but it's a Catholic tradition, and he just seems to come up with some classics. I heard that he said that Christ stopped being divine at birth and then picked up the mantle again on the resurrection. I don't know how true that is, but unfortunately I was, like, tempted to believe it. So okay. All due respect to his office, not that guy, as it were.
Shake, your thoughts.
Well, if you become the Pope, Bob, yeah, I say yeah. Or Father Zakaria Butros. Those kind of...
Well, God willing, I'll never become the Pope. I would like to get married. So yeah, go on. Any other comments on this question?
I don't want to really give a solid answer about this because I'm not really in good position with the Pope right now.
Okay, so my own perspective is that the Roman Catholic Church is increasingly committing itself to an understanding of religiosity that can be described as the religion of humanity, which is emphasizing all those things that are common human expressions or perceived to be common human values. And the moment you do that, you stop being distinctive and you just get chewed up by more distinctive religions. Because if you're saying that what makes you Roman Catholic isn't important, but what makes you human, and then someone comes along and says, become a Jehovah's Witness, and here's the reasons why, you're defenseless. And so you become a Jehovah's Witness. But the Jehovah's Witness doesn't go, well, what's important is what you share with the Roman Catholic. He's going, no, the Roman Catholics are wrong and we're right. And that is why the Catholic Church is losing converts left, right, and center to everybody. Before we move on to the next question, Aqualaden, I'm going to ask you to take a step out of the chat and I'm going to bring in Theodosius. If you could take a step out, please.
Yep.
Peace be with Theodosius. How are you?
Greetings, both. I'm doing well, man. Regarding the Pope question that I can see on the screen,
yeah, go on then.
I agree because I'm not Roman Catholic, so I agree that his office is invalid. But got to remember, half of the things that the Pope says is not ex cathedra, so it has no bondings to Roman Catholics. But Roman Catholicism is dead, in my opinion. Like, her queens and her kings are gone. The Crusaders have vanished. Masses unrecognized. Promoter of Amazon paganism. 70%, I think, was US Roman Catholics are non-believers in the real presence of our Lord in the Holy Eucharist. And the Prince of the Roman Church, who's the Pope, bishops, cardinals are silent. Meanwhile, giving St. Peter's relics that no longer belong to Rome, but to the Orthodox Church. So
just to say, this for me is not a partisan thing. So I mean that question invited a certain kind of answer, but the point of my program, the point of my show is not to give slants or ideas of one denomination or another. But let's move on to the next question. Let's have a look. So, Theodosius, you can go first on that one. Just bounce off the comment, the question.
I'm struggling to understand. Is he saying like the inability of Christians to be in the political realm?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you my thoughts on that question, and maybe that'll help you chew your own. I think for me, the defending. Yeah, the question's not brilliantly worded, but it might be that someone's not right in their first language. It seems to me, bounce off it as you understand it. I think that basically the reason why Christians are not defending their position in our society is because for hundreds of years now, since the Peace of Westphalia in Western Europe and since the fall of Constantinople in the East, Christians have had zero political vision. We've had no vision to engage with, and so we've not had really much sense of something to defend. And the world, we've bought into it. We've bought into this idea that we are liberal consumers, that we buy into the liberal progressive narrative about society, and that means that we're invested in it. And if we're invested in it, then obviously we struggle to critique it in a way that emphasizes our distinctiveness and separateness to it. And that's why it's important to be involved, I think, in Christian communes like the Bruderhof or some monastery somewhere, because it gives you a sense of what it is to be alien in our culture. Kay, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I suppose that the world of today does elicit in Western society a laziness basically in Christianity, because we're already here, we're already established. And the Bible, when it speaks of defending, is very clear. It says we tear down or destroy any false argument or lofty opinion that sets itself up against the true knowledge of God. So I think that if Christians were more biblical in this, it doesn't mean it has to be a physical defense. It doesn't mean we fight not against the flesh, as it were, but theologically we can. It harks back to letting Muslims pray in churches. I mean, why not just open a mosque? I don't understand why the need for the lands, the real estate. Like, I don't get it, although the mosques are being used as morgues to some extent. But yeah, the defense of Christianity must be vociferous. We're not out of the woods. We're told that we'll be hated, but at the same time we are attempting to preach to all nations the truth, and therefore nobody likes the truth, especially when it hurts, especially when you have to give up certain sins, or but the fact is that you won't have to do it alone. You'll have the Holy Spirit to come in and make you a new person. I think that defense is worth dying for, to be brutally honest, and I don't think just sitting around making cupcakes for a Sunday fete is going to cut it. So, not that we need to do anything at all to earn salvation, apart from, what we need to do. But yeah, I think it is lazy at the moment. I don't think Christians in Lebanon or Christians in Pakistan or Iran they don't have the luxury of laziness when it comes to defending their position. So I think we should stand with them in solidarity, even though we're in the West.
Amen. Sheikh, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it's about laziness from the Christians. It's more a part of the Christians all around the world is unaware of what's really going on with other Christian communities, and some others are knowledge, but they're unorganized, so they know what to do and they know what's needed, but they don't know how to do it because they're unorganized. That's why we see that's we like laziness is not the problem, I'm saying.
Fair enough. Theodosius, have you thought about what you want to say?
I guess a lot of Christians mistakenly have like a Gnostic, Manichaean way of looking at Earth. That, and also with the liberalization of separation of church and state, like the church, the separation of church and state can suit the church, but it is disastrous for the state because it would just deliver it over to pure Manichaeanism. So, like, it just goes straight to chaos because if you separate the spiritual from the material, I mean, it's just to me, it's very Gnostic.
Okie. So, guys, we're coming to the end of the show. So I'm going to have the last word, guys. So if you all want to mute your mics. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to read a psalm, and then Sheikh, I'm going to ask you to say the Lord's Prayer for us in Arabic, please. So, you know, my final thoughts is essentially this, which is I think it's important as Christians that we don't give in to a counsel of despair or a counsel of hopelessness. It's fair to say that our situation in the world at this moment in time is not great, and there's a lot that is being lost and a lot that will probably still be lost. But unless we actually commit ourselves to turning around the ship, unless we commit ourselves once again to the idea that we can actually win and act accordingly, then we will continue to lose. And as Christians, we're called to be a people of hope. Hope is not something that gives in to despair. And I look around and I see lots of reasons why we can despair. But I also recognize that there isn't a single one of the problems that the church faces that if it allows itself to organize, to train, to mobilize, and to resist, there isn't one of those problems that can't be overcome. It's about creating new structures within the body politic of the church, the Christian people, to tackle these problems. Now, some of them we can do as individuals, like some challenges we face at an individual level. Some challenges we need to face as a group within a local community, or maybe a group within our local fellowship. Some of them we need to deal with as a fellowship, and some of them we need to deal with as a collection of fellowships, perhaps within a region. Some challenges are at the national level, and it involves all Christians working together to challenge. But some problems are global, and it will need networks that are global to deal with those challenges. And when we have that in mind, we can recognize what bits I can do as an individual and what bits are above me. What bits do I need other people to do, and what bits do I need my fellowship to do, and what bits do the fellowships need to work together on? There's lots of challenges. But if we are people of hope who truly believe that with the resurrection, Christ has won the victory, then that means how can we despair? We simply must commit ourselves to the cause. The war has been won. It's just now about mopping up the battle. And with that, I'm going to read a psalm, and then Sheikh is going to read for us. He's going to say the Our Father in Arabic. Are you okay with that, Sheikh?
Yes, by all means, please.
Brilliant. So I'll read the psalm, and then you say you'll know when it's ended, and you can say the Lord's Prayer. A musical composition by David, which is sang in the Lord to the Lord concerning a Benjaminite named Cush. O Lord my God, in you I have taken shelter. Deliver me from all who chase me. Rescue me. Otherwise, they will rip me to shreds like a lion. They will tear me to bits, and no one will be able to rescue me. O Lord my God, if I have done what they say, or am guilty of unjust actions, or have wronged my ally, or helped his lawless enemy, may an enemy relentlessly chase me and catch me. May he trample me to death and leave me lying dishonored in the dust. Selah. Stand up angrily, Yahweh. Rise up with raging fury against my enemies. Wake up for my sake and execute the judgments you have decreed for them. The countries are assembled all around you. Take once more your rightful place over them. The Lord judges the nations. Vindicate me, Lord, because I am innocent, because I am blameless. O exalted one, may the evil deeds of the wicked come to an end, but make the innocent secure. O righteous God, you who examine the inner thoughts and motives, the exalted God is my shield, the one who delivers the morality upright. God is a just judge. He is angry throughout the day. If a person does not repent, God will wield his sword. He has prepared to shoot his bow. He has prepared deadly weapons to use against him. He gets ready to shoot flaming arrows. See the one who is pregnant with wickedness, who conceives destructive plans and gives birth to harmful lies. He digs a pit and then falls into the hole he has made. He becomes the victim of his own destructive plans, and the violence he intended for others falls on his own head. I will thank the Lord for his justice. I will sing praises to Yahweh Most High. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Amen. أبانا الذي في السماوات ليتقدس اسمك ليأتي ملكوتك لتكن مشيئتك كما في السماء كذلك على الأرض. أعطنا خبزنا كفاف يومنا واغفر لنا ذنوبنا وخطايانا كما نحن نغفر لمن خطئ وأساء إلينا ولا تدخلنا في التجارب لكن نجنا من الشرير لأن لك الملك والقوة والمجد إلى أبد الآبدين آمين.
Amen. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. Have a lovely evening. I'm going to get a cup of tea. And
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Kay. And I wish you all a great night. And
You too.
yes, please share, subscribe, and like, and all of that stuff that Nada, I'm sure, has been bashing away on the keys. And I'll probably be doing another show, hopefully this Sunday, speaking to Naren, who is a Assyrian Christian activist from America, who's going to be talking about the plight of Assyrian Christians. I'm just waiting for confirmation on that. But if it doesn't happen this Sunday, it'll happen sometime next week. Good night. God bless. And remember,
God bless.
Thank you, Bob. Thank
Christ is risen.
He is.
you.
Amen.
He is. Amen.